Let's be honest for a second. Most people don't actually avoid solo travel because they hate traveling. They avoid it because the idea of being completely alone scares them. And honestly, that fear makes sense. The thought of landing in another country by yourself, walking through an unfamiliar airport, sitting alone in a restaurant, figuring everything out without help, it feels uncomfortable. People imagine loneliness immediately. They imagine awkwardness, silence, getting lost, making mistakes, or looking stupid in front of strangers. So instead of going alone, they wait. They wait for friends to save money. They wait for someone to finally commit to the trip. They wait for a relationship. They wait for the perfect time. But the strange thing is, that perfect situation almost never arrives.
Plans get canceled. People get busy. Life keeps moving.
And without even realizing it, years start disappearing while you continue sitting in the same place, dreaming about a life you still haven't experienced. That's the dangerous thing about waiting. It feels temporary while it's happening, but suddenly a huge part of your life is already gone. And deep down, a lot of people know this. That's why solo travel stays in their mind for years. Because there's something powerful about the idea of leaving your normal life behind and stepping into the unknown completely alone. It feels terrifying, but at the same time, it feels freeing. Like maybe there's another version of yourself waiting somewhere outside your comfort zone. A version of yourself that you can't discover while living the exact same routine every day. And maybe that's why solo travel changes people so much. Because for the first time in a long time, you stop hiding behind familiarity. It's just you and the world. A lot of people imagine solo travel as this perfect cinematic experience where you instantly feel free, confident, and happy all the time. But the reality is usually much different in the beginning. Your first solo trip can actually feel overwhelming. Even simple things suddenly feel stressful when nobody is there with you. Finding the right gate at the airport, checking into a hotel, ordering food in another language, figuring out transportation. Things that seem small suddenly feel much bigger when you're alone. And then there's a moment almost every solo traveler experiences sooner or later. Usually it happens at night. Maybe you're sitting in a small hotel room, or walking through unfamiliar streets, or eating dinner alone somewhere, far away from home. And suddenly it hits you. I'm really here alone. For some people, that moment feels exciting. For others, it feels uncomfortable or even emotional. Because when there's nobody around distracting you, you start noticing your own thoughts more clearly. You notice your fears, your insecurities, the things you normally avoid thinking about back home. And honestly, that's one of the reasons solo travel changes people so deeply. Not because of the countries themselves, but because solitude forces you to spend time with yourself in a way modern life normally doesn't. Back home, most people constantly distract themselves. Phones, social media, work, noise, routines, conversations. There's always something filling the silence. But when you're alone in another country, especially for the first time, there are moments where it's just you and your own mind. And at first, that can feel uncomfortable. But slowly, something begins to change. You stop needing constant distraction. You stop overthinking every small interaction. You become calmer in situations that used to make you nervous. Little by little, you start realizing that you're more capable than you thought. Not in some dramatic movie way, but in real life. You figure things out, you adapt, you survive mistakes. And every small problem you solve alone builds a kind of confidence that's very hard to build any other way. Not fake confidence for social media, real confidence, quiet confidence. The kind that stays with you long after the trip ends.
One of the strangest things about solo travel is that eventually the world starts feeling smaller, but your life starts feeling bigger. Before their first solo trip, most people imagine the world as something intimidating. Different countries feel distant. Foreign languages feel stressful. Airports feel confusing. Everything outside their normal environment feels difficult and unpredictable. But after traveling alone, even once, your perspective starts changing completely. You realize that most fears in your head were much bigger than reality itself. You realize airports are just systems you learn with time. You realize getting lost isn't the end of the world. You realize most people are too busy living their own lives to judge you the way you imagined. And slowly, the unknown stops feeling dangerous. It starts feeling interesting. That's when something deeper begins happening internally. You stop seeing yourself as someone who can't do things alone. You stop depending on constant comfort. You stop waiting for permission to live your life. And honestly, this mindset shift affects much more than travel. A lot of people come back from solo trips feeling different, even if they can't fully explain why. Some become more independent, some become calmer. Some finally feel confident making decisions on their own. Others realize they've been living according to expectations that never truly made them happy. Because when you remove yourself from your normal environment, you suddenly see your life from a distance. The routines, the stress, the people around you, the habits you've repeated for years, everything becomes easier to question. And for the first time in a long time, you actually have space to think clearly. That's why so many people describe solo travel as life-changing. Not because every moment is magical, and not because traveling fixes all your problems, but because it changes the relationship you have with yourself. You stop seeing yourself as fragile. You stop seeing the world as unreachable. And once that mental barrier disappears, a lot of other things in life suddenly stop feeling impossible too. At the same time, solo travel is not always exciting sunsets, perfect photos, and freedom every second of the day. And honestly, this is something people almost never talk about online. Sometimes solo travel feels lonely, really lonely. There are moments where you wish someone familiar was there with you. Moments where you finish an amazing experience and instinctively turn around, wanting to talk to someone about it. But nobody is there. Sometimes you walk through beautiful places, surrounded by hundreds of people, and still feel completely alone. And that feeling can catch you off guard, especially during your first trip. Social media usually shows the highlights of solo travel, but it rarely shows the quiet moments in between. The awkward dinners alone, the silence in hotel rooms at night, the homesickness, the moments where you question why you even came. But weirdly enough, those moments are also part of what makes solo travel meaningful, because loneliness forces honesty. Back home, people constantly surround themselves with distractions, so they never have to fully sit with their thoughts. But when you're alone in another country, there's nowhere to run from yourself. And eventually, you start becoming more comfortable with your own company. You stop seeing being alone as something negative. You start noticing small things more. The atmosphere of a city at night, random conversations with strangers, the sound of trains, cafes, rain on unfamiliar streets. Your relationship with the world becomes quieter, but somehow deeper. And over time, solitude stops feeling like emptiness. It starts feeling peaceful. That's one of the biggest differences between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness feels like something is missing. Solitude feels like finally being able to hear yourself think. And once you experience that feeling in another part of the world, normal life often feels very different when you come back home.
After a while, something unexpected starts happening during solo travel. The fear that felt so overwhelming in the beginning slowly disappears, and freedom starts replacing it instead. You wake up realizing you can do whatever you want that day. No waiting for other people, no arguing about plans, no adjusting your entire experience around someone else's mood. If you want to wake up at sunrise and walk through the city alone, you can. If you want to sit in a small cafe for 3 hours doing absolutely nothing, nobody will judge you. If you suddenly decide to change cities, book another train, or explore random streets with no plan, you can do that too. And at first, this level of freedom feels strange because most people are not used to making decisions completely for themselves. In normal life, people constantly adapt to expectations. Family expectations, work expectations, relationship expectations, social expectations. But solo travel removes a lot of that noise. And once you experience life without constant pressure around you, it becomes very hard to ignore how restricted your normal routine actually feels. That's why so many people come back from solo trips with a completely different mindset. Some change careers, some move cities, some become more independent. Some finally realize they've spent years building a life that doesn't actually make them happy. Because solo travel gives you distance from your normal environment. And distance creates clarity. You start seeing your life more honestly. What genuinely excites you, what drains you, what matters to you, and what doesn't. And maybe that's why people become addicted to traveling alone. Not because they're trying to escape life, but because for the first time in a long time, they feel fully connected to it. Even if you never become a full-time traveler, even if you only take one solo trip in your entire life, I genuinely think everyone should experience it at least once. Because there's something powerful about proving to yourself that you can exist outside the version of life you've always known. Solo travel forces growth in a very honest way. You can't hide behind other people. You can't avoid responsibility. You can't wait for someone else to solve problems for you. Every decision becomes yours. And that can feel scary at first, but eventually it becomes empowering. You realize you're capable of adapting almost anywhere. You realize most problems are temporary. You realize confidence is built through experience, not through thinking about experience. And maybe the most important thing solo travel teaches you is this: the world is not as closed off as people think. Most places are filled with ordinary people just trying to live their lives. Some will help you when you're lost. Some will talk to you for hours, even if you barely speak the same language. Some moments will stay in your memory forever for no reason other than how human they felt. And years later, you probably won't remember every hotel, every train, or every tourist attraction, but you will remember the feeling. The feeling of arriving somewhere completely unfamiliar and realizing you're gonna be okay. The feeling of navigating a different country alone for the first time. The feeling of becoming more independent than you ever thought possible. That's the real reason solo travel changes people. It's not about escaping reality. It's about discovering parts of yourself that normal life never gave you the chance to meet. And maybe right now, you're sitting there thinking you could never do something like this. Maybe the idea still feels uncomfortable. Maybe you're waiting for more confidence, more money, or the right moment. But honestly, the right moment rarely arrives on its own. Sometimes your life only changes after you decide to step into something uncertain. So start small. You don't need a perfect plan. You don't need to travel across the world tomorrow. Just take the first step. Because one day, you may look back and realize that the moment you decided to travel alone was the moment everything else in your life started changing too.
If you're still here, I just want to leave you with one simple thought. You're probably not going to feel ready. Not today, not tomorrow, maybe not even next month. And that's completely normal. Almost nobody ever feels fully ready for their first solo trip, or their first big life change, or anything that actually matters. Because ready is something people wait for, but rarely feel. And while you're waiting for that feeling, life quietly keeps moving forward. The truth is, solo travel doesn't start with confidence. It starts with uncertainty. It starts with doubt. It starts with small decisions that feel slightly uncomfortable. But every person you see traveling confidently alone once stood exactly where you are right now. They were unsure. They were nervous. They were overthinking everything. And then they went anyway. And that's the difference. Not courage, not money, not experience, just a decision to start. So if there's even a small part of you that wants to see the world, don't ignore it. You don't need a perfect plan. You don't need perfect timing. You don't need perfect confidence. You just need movement. Start small. Book something simple. Go somewhere nearby. Learn as you go. Because the version of you that you're waiting for doesn't appear before the journey. It appears because of it. And maybe one day you'll look back at this moment and realize this was the beginning.